As you can see behind me, there's the Richland County Courthouse and the Wahpeton, North Dakota Police Department. I saw K-9 Unit Officer Dustin Hill standing outside the department, so I turned around and was going to ask him a question about unwarranted raids. When I was standing on the public street filming him, he asked if I needed help. I proceeded to tell him I was simply filming a story. That's when he told me I was under arrest for hindering and put my hands behind my back, handcuffing me, bringing me into the station where I was interrogated for over a half hour. I was then released after doing nothing illegal.
I jogged over to the department. I was going to wait for Mr. Hill's comment without interrupting him. I began filming on a public street. That's when this happened.
What are you doing?
Excellent.
What can I do for you?
Nothing. I'm just covering a story for MinnesotaChange.org about unwarranted raids in Wahpeton, so...
You're under arrest for interference with a police investigation. Put your hands behind your back.
Everything was going fine until I mentioned my story was about unwarranted raids. Dustin Hill quickly snapped his head and turned to the defensive.
Nothing. I'm just covering a story for MinnesotaChange.org about unwarranted raids in Wahpeton, so...
You're under arrest for interference with a police investigation. Put your hands behind your back.
I was just standing outside the Wahpeton, North Dakota Police Department, filming an officer who practices unwarranted raids when he came up and arrested me unlawfully, handcuffed me, and I was detained, interrogated, and harassed by one of the officers. After being arrested, Officer Dustin Hill had 3 other officers escort me into the police department and place me in an interview room, where one officer came in and told me he was Dustin Hill's supervisor and asked me where I felt I had the right to film Dustin Hill. I told him that North Dakota law, United States law, and the First Amendment of the United States Constitution gives me every right to film anybody in public. He then left. They left me there, handcuffed, for nearly an hour. He then returned and told me to stand up, remove my handcuffs, told me to grab my camera and leave. He told me that I needed to understand that I pissed Dustin Hill off. There was no police investigation going on. Dustin Hill was talking to a citizen. He arrested me unlawfully. I was detained unlawfully. I'm 17 years old. My parents were not notified, which is also illegal, and I was never even read my Miranda rights. I would appreciate it if anyone would call and voice their concerns to the Wahpeton Police Department, because this is tyranny, this is a police state, this will not be tolerated. An officer cannot arrest anyone for no reason and then release them later and think that's okay, because it's not. So let's let our voices be heard. This is Robert Wanek reporting for MNChange.org.
No charges were filed against me. I was detained to send a message that a badge warrants authoritarian power and that pissing an officer off is unacceptable. The Chief of Police, in his statement, encourages questions, so please call the department and ask him why Dustin Hill is allowed to disregard the law.
Some questions are being raised in Wahpeton about illegal searches and seizures.
Super interesting story here. A 17-year-old aspiring journalist was videotaped being arrested for what he claims no reason or probable cause, and then he posted that video online. It is creating quite the buzz. And what possible, if any, illegal procedures has the officer conducted in the past? Reporter Dylan Wollenhouse did some digging, and here's what he found.
Inside the department, so I turned around.
At 14, Robert Wanek started making videos about what he felt was injustice in the schools and with law enforcement.
It has roughly 18,000 subscribers.
His latest is now causing a police investigation and some calling for change.
Nearly 3,000 likes and 227 dislikes.
In less than 24 hours, the video has already received more than 130,000 hits on YouTube.
Wanek told Hill he was shooting a video about unwarranted raids in Wahpeton while standing on a public street. Within seconds,
The video clearly shows that I didn't do anything illegal.
Officer Dustin Hill put handcuffs on Wanek and takes the teenager under arrest.
And so...
You're under
Wanek was also cuffed and held for more than an hour, then released and never charged with a crime. The minor's parents were also never notified. Unreasonable search and seizure protected by the Constitution.
There's unwarranted raids being practiced by this officer, so we're going to try to intimidate you, arrest you on false charges, and then release you and think that it's all going to be okay.
We tried to talk to Officer Dustin Hill, but he was in Minnesota for police training this week.
Have you ever had any complaints in the past about Officer Hill?
Yes, I have received complaints about him in the past, and I've also received many statements of praise.
The complaints Chief Thorsteinson says were nothing that needed any disciplinary action.
I had a lady that said he was too abrupt with her, and that type of thing.
We also checked police records. We didn't find any filed cases against Officer Hill regarding any illegal searches.
Is it possible that Officer Hill made a mistake? You bet. Am I prepared to say that's the case? No.
This is Robert Wanek reporting for MN.
As for Wanek, he's welcoming the investigation by the chief.
I would genuinely hope that he's actually looking into the event.
The shooting of the video was the first time Hill and Wanek had ever met. Wanek says he never has been arrested and has no criminal record. The Wahpeton Police Department says it is investigating the incident and will take disciplinary action.
You're under arrest for interference with a police investigation. Put your hands behind your back. This officer is under suspension tonight for the arrest that turned a Wahpeton teen into an internet sensation. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Almost everyone who has seen it has an opinion.
Either the Wahpeton police officer overstepped his bounds or the teenager was provoking him.
We may never settle that issue, but this much is clear. Wahpeton officer Dustin Hill did make an illegal arrest, and today the police chief announced his suspension without pay. In addition, Hill will take 40 hours of training on city ordinances, the North Dakota Century Code, and constitutional law.
What is next for Robert Wanek, the 17-year-old filmmaker who taped his own arrest? Valley News Team's Kristen Helgeson spoke with him a short time ago.
You're under arrest for interference with a police investigation. Put your hands behind your back.
If this video of his arrest were not made available on YouTube, where over 150,000 people viewed it, 17-year-old Robert Wanek questions whether anything would have been done about his unlawful arrest.
And I think this basically supports the fact that I was truthful in my reporting on the issue.
Wanek says even with the tape rolling and visible to the whole world, people thought he might be lying about the circumstances by which he was taken into custody.
A lot of the community in Fargo-Moorhead, Breckenridge, Wahpeton questioned the credibility and the authenticity of it, and how it was possibly edited or how my story was falsified.
The tape was not edited.
Well, after a review of the case, we determined that the Officer Hill's arrest of this young man, there was not sufficient probable cause.
Chief Thorsteinson says his office did everything possible to see that Wanek was quickly released. Not only is Officer Hill being disciplined, but every member of the Wahpeton Police Department will have to undergo training on the rules of arrest and constitutional law.
You know, I'd rather be redundant in educating people than inadequate.
After 30 minutes with his hands behind his back in cuffs, without being read his Miranda rights, without being allowed to make a phone call at just 17 years old, Wanek says this disciplinary action is exactly what the police force needs.
And maybe it'll prevent them from jumping to conclusions and falsely arresting people in the future.
He says he feels especially validated after having his own character called on the carpet. Kristen Helgeson, Valley News Live.
In addition to his suspension, Officer Hill will have to undergo 40 hours of legal training.